Hey everybody, this is Richie Allen, and you are watching the Make Peace with War podcast. We fight battles every day: sickness, disease, discouragement, depression, anxiety, financial issues, devastating events, deep losses. The state of our external and internal worlds and the state of the church can leave us with physical, mental, and spiritual wounds from the battle. The goal of Make Peace with War is to walk through these battles together and draw strength and encouragement from each other, to master a mindset of peace in the middle of warfare, internal peace in external chaos. Listen, I don't have all the answers, but I know this: we find the answers when we search for them. So let's discover together how to fight our battles not just with peace, but from peace, from a peaceful place that is deeply anchored and isn't shaken in storms. Make Peace with War is a journey into living by, through, and in the Spirit, with deep discussion and practical insights into becoming peaceful warriors. Welcome to Make Peace with War. Hey guys, here on the 7th part of the church's series of Make Peace with War, we are diving into a subject that we meant to dive into in episode 2, and for some reason we had some technical difficulties and ended up losing that episode. And also, we just got caught up doing some other things and talking about some other things. But we are revisiting that today, and specifically, we are talking about giving, about the idea of building the kingdom with giving, and what legacy teams look like, and what that concept is about. Let me tell you this, that we are speaking from personal experience. First of all, this isn't just an idea. It's not something that we haven't personally experienced. We have personally experienced it. But not only that, the bigger thing is we were a part of the problem. Everybody that's talking here in this episode, we were a part of the problem. We enabled this culture. We celebrated this culture. But now we've had a chance to look at it and see it for what it is, and we want to be a part of the solution now. This is something that doesn't just happen in one church. This happens in so many churches. In fact, it's a model that is being used, I would say, effectively. If you look at it from one perspective, it's a model that's being used all over the place. But what I want us to do is I want us to have these conversations, not to point out the errors in a church, a specific church, but to point out the errors in a concept and in a flawed solution that we think we've come up with to further the kingdom of God. So I've removed names. We've named names in the podcast, a few names, and I've removed those because I don't want us to get caught up in who said what and that sort of thing. What's important for us is for the ideas to come across. And this is an issue. This is a big, big, big issue in the church today. And we recognize that harm is being done, great harm is being done by pushing this concept. And listen, let me tell you this. If a pastor says, or any leader says that they wouldn't change a thing, then there's an issue with that leader. If they look back at their leadership and say, hey, you know what, I wouldn't change a thing. I'm so glad that everything happened the way it happened. No, there's an issue there. And we have taken this conversation, we've talked about it, we were a part of this issue. And we are going to do everything that we can to right that. And now we want to become a part of the solution. And I hope that you do too. I really do. So take a listen to this episode, and we'd love to hear your feedback, love to hear your comments, share, like, subscribe, do all the things. And then my prayer, though, is that this will cause us to think and help us to examine ourselves a little better and realize that sometimes what we think is a solution is a problem, and we need to become the solution to that problem. I don't know if this is going to work, but hey, we're here. We're here. We're doing the thing.
Have fun.
We're doing the thing. And today, no.
Nope. Well, while Richie's incapacitated with laughter, we started a conversation
Yes, please.
on the last episode.
Would you host this one?
So we're continuing that conversation here about money.
Yeah, we did talk about money.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get serious and I feel like it's ridiculous. But we did, and I'm trying to remember the context of where we were when we were talking about that. We were talking about just the culture of the church, and I don't even remember how money got involved in that conversation. But it's a great conversation for us to have, right? About
you are on the struggle bus.
We were talking about how transactional things can become.
All right, transactional relationships in the church, right?
Yes.
All right. So back actually in the first episode of the Churches series, we were going to make the second episode about talking more about money in the church and legacy and kingdom builders and all those kinds of things, and we just never got to it. I think we had some technical difficulties or something. I can't remember what it was, but surprise, surprise, we've only had a few of those around here. But I think it's worth a conversation because money is actually a really big issue in modern day church. Or it's always been money. There's a need for money, right? And this is, she's trying.
We're gonna get through this, y'all. We've been through a lot together, and we'll make it through this episode together.
I just started thinking about turnips.
Oh my God.
They are the funniest vegetable. So.
I don't know if I can keep it together.
You can't squeeze blood from that turnip.
What do we do? I can't.
We can do this.
Listen, I'm not cutting any of this. We're just gonna let it happen.
Oh my gosh.
We're gonna let it happen. Y'all get an inside track into.
Well, you have to at least explain how we all just sit around having conversations. And
yes,
we're friends.
We do. We're friends, and we have stupid conversations. And then Jason has stupid drop-ins.
Yeah.
And there's no way
my spiritual gift.
There's no way to recover.
You can't recover from these kinds of conversations, people. And then you've got to try to have a serious conversation about money in the church, and all we can think about is squeezing blood from a turnip.
Which is what some pastors try to do with their saints.
Hey,
there you go.
Segue!
There it is.
You're welcome.
Natalie's going to get frustrated with us in a minute.
She's right on the edge of
Mama
the
Nat is going to be, she's going to be like, get
it together.
Get it together, people.
This is an
You are
important
wasting
one.
time. Oh, my God. All right, so talking about squeezing blood from a turnip.
Okay, please.
Okay. No, this is really good. It's a good segue, right? Because we all, I don't know if I can segue that.
Jason and Nat are so mad at us right now.
I'm definitely not.
No.
And Jason's the instigator who sits
He
back.
did it. He did it.
Oh, God. I cancel the assignment.
Of Jason.
Of Jason. I cancel the assignment of the enemy. Oh, my God. Okay. Now let's see if we can actually do this. All right. So let's talk about...
Oh my God.
This is ridiculous.
All right. So here's something that I saw posted the other day. This is maybe a good starter. I'm not going to say what the name of the organization is that posted it because it doesn't matter. But it says the number one enemy of every vision is lack of provision. And it says the kings within the body of Christ are vital to bringing God's will to pass for local churches throughout the world. Without the kings, there is only vision in the church. Ministries can cast the most incredible visions possible, but until people's hearts are stirred to bring in the resource for these visions, nothing can be accomplished. However, when the kings are operating in their true callings, then the provision is released and there is abundance for those God-given visions to be fulfilled. All right. Sounds good. Kind of. But there's a problem with this. There's a problem with this mindset. All right, first of all, the whole idea of the kings. All right, this is, well, let me hear your reaction before I get too deep into that. What's your thoughts?
It's a no for me. I don't know who posted that, but it sounds similar to something that I've heard a lot of before, which is really like your generosity sets the pace, and that's something.
That's exactly what this is saying.
I don't like it. If it's God's church, God sets the pace.
God sets it.
And so
exactly.
I feel like it's putting too much in us, in man, and not enough stock in God. And that's not listen, I'm a tither, always have been, always will be. I absolutely believe it's really sad to me that in most churches only about 15% of people pay tithes. So I believe in supporting the church. So nothing I'm saying today is against that. But when it turns into that feels like manipulation to me.
Well, it does. It does. The idea that the vision, the number one enemy of every vision is lack of provision. That doesn't work for me because, first of all, it's not our vision. It shouldn't be.
Right.
It should be God's vision. And if it's God's vision, he kind of owns the cattle on 1,000 hills.
That's right.
He can kind of take care of it himself. So does that mean that we shouldn't be his hands and feet in that? No. Obviously, giving is going to benefit. But if we hang the success of our vision on that and say, you have to give in order for the vision to be accomplished, that's manipulation.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like money's the number one value.
Because it is.
Well, I think the problematic thing for me is God chooses to partner with us and work through us to accomplish what he wants to accomplish in his kingdom, but he doesn't need us. No. And that makes it sound like God needs our money when God doesn't need our money. Now, if you got money and God wants to use your money, great. That's a different thing. Be generous, give. Right. But the idea that just because you got it, God needs it, and he can't accomplish what he wants to accomplish without it is, very problematic.
It is. I agree.
Anti-biblical. It's not problematic. It's just wrong.
Just wrong.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about the concept that is used in a lot of churches, specifically ARC churches, but in a lot of churches, the same concept, even if it's named differently, the same concept is being utilized in a lot of the more attractional church models, and it's called legacy teams. All right. And for those of you who aren't familiar with legacy teams, let's talk about what that is. Okay. So legacy teams. You guys drop in at any point. I'm just going to say what I know about legacy teams. So the idea of legacy teams was we want to create a legacy, right? We use the word legacy. It's a great word, but we want to use the word legacy to how do we build a legacy for the next generation? And so the legacy is apparently buildings and production and all of that sort of thing. So we need your money in order to build a legacy. That's kind of the idea, right? So in order for us to have this vision accomplished, we got to have provision. It's got to come from you guys. And so a legacy team, though, is typically the top givers in the church. And correct me if I'm wrong, it's the top givers in the church that are invited, is typically invited to have extra access as long as they give to a certain amount or more, right?
Yes.
All right.
And
So that's a short version, but let's dive a little deeper into it.
And here's like my initial thought on it. It's transactional, which we already kind of addressed. But really what's happening is we're saying that we've identified that this person has the gift of giving when really they just have the means to give. They might not have the gift of giving.
And there's a difference there. That's a good differentiation. Yeah.
And so that's also problematic to me because it's like we're saying because you have the means to give, you have the gift of giving. Don't worry about serving. We don't need you to. This is your serve.
Yeah.
This is your serve. You have the gift of giving
Because you have money.
because you have money. But that's not what the gift of giving is about. You don't have to have money to have the gift of giving or be generous.
To be a kingdom builder, it doesn't require you to have, right? You have widows with one mite
Yeah.
have a gift of giving.
Yes. And you can give in other ways too.
And you absolutely can. You absolutely can. So little boys with 5 loaves and 2 fishes had a gift of giving,
Yes.
Yeah.
right? They didn't have a lot. They had a gift of giving, though. But what we've seen happen is because you have money, now you're labeled with the gift of giving. And that's a great differentiation. There's
And
just
it's
means-
transactional because now it's like you have this gift, and in exchange for it, you get access that others don't get. So then it makes it feel like some giving is more important than other giving, and I just don't believe that. I don't believe that, I'm thinking of a specific widow right now in my mind on a fixed income that I know that gives the same amount of money to her church every single week. I don't think that her giving is any less than
It's not.
It's more than.
a millionaire who's doing a tax write-off at the end of the year. Like it's not.
I mean, it's been a while. It's been a while since I read The Widow and the Mite, but correct me if I'm wrong. But the principle was that out of her lack, what she was giving was more of a sacrifice
Exactly.
than out of someone who they can give $100,000 and not even feel it. Where somebody might give $25 and it's literally like they don't know how they're going to buy groceries, but they're going to be faithful with what they
And
have.
that's not a
Exactly.
knock. If you have $100,000 to give your church,
Please
give it.
do it.
Yeah,
Great.
Give it to
Yeah.
your church.
Absolutely. But and I don't like to use taglines, but it does make sense. Not equal giving, but equal sacrifice. That actually does make sense.
Yeah.
But do we actually live that idea? Not necessarily. But if $25 is a large portion of your discretionary income, and $100,000 is a small percentage of your discretionary income, then the one who's sacrificing more is the one with the $25.
And the one who needs the more access, honestly, too, is the one who is hurting more. Can we just talk about that?
Yeah,
for a
let's
second?
talk about the access part.
Yes, because by access, what you're meaning is you have more access to usually the pastor or the pastors. You have access to VIP events that maybe just be put on that the rest of the church is not invited to. It's a very exclusive event that the church usually drops, a large dime on to make you feel special.
A lot of dimes.
Yes. And so let's just talk about those people get access to that, and they have access to a lot of things. The ones who really need your access aren't getting
Yeah.
it.
So I had an interview with a friend of ours that, and I'm not going to name his name. He said he was okay with it, but I'm not going to right now. And this is his experience with a legacy team. We're going to listen through this and we'll respond. We may cut some of it out so that we don't, so there's not 10 minutes of y'all listening to the interview necessarily, but we can stop and respond at any point. But let's listen to it and let's just kind of get his story, and then we can talk about that.
I was Episcopal. I went to confirmation class and all that. I stopped going to church from probably 17 all the way up till by 31. When I was 31, 32, I heard about the 429. I started going to 429, and it kind of just changed my life. I've never tithed or nothing. I started tithing like $25 a week, and then, when I started giving more, and, I started my own business, and, it got up to $50, and it got up to $75 a week, and it got up to $250 a week when I was trying to get on Legacy. And, I was like, hey, I heard $10,000, so I went and started giving above and beyond because I wanted to make an impact and have something, to have a legacy, And I've been part of the team since day one. I figured, I wanted to have something. I wanted to. So
let's take a second there, because I want to clarify the $10,000 thing that he just said. So, in a lot of churches, they will have a specific threshold where they say you can't be on this team, this legacy team, this team of people with the gift of giving, unless you can give a threshold of this amount a year, right? And in this case, it's $10,000 that he's talking about. So he's pushing his giving up as he goes to try to get to that point with a new business of $10,000 a year, so he can be on this legacy team to help leave a legacy, right? So.
Legacy, and I was.
Well, let me ask you this: you started at the church like day one, right? Weren't you pulling trailers day one?
Yeah, before day one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Setups and everything. Yeah. So.
Yeah, you were doing that all the way back.
July of 2019, I started my own business. God's been blessing me. I was just starting tithing more because I wanted to get on this legacy team, and I heard that the threshold was 5,000 when the church first started. Then it was in at the 10,000.
It's going up.
I finally, it took me forever to get a hold of anybody to get on legacy team. Yeah, I finally reached out to Pastor, got me in contact with somebody, and then somebody else then Pastor took it over. It was a mess. And by that time, I was just, and then Pastor sat down and talked to me, tried to talk about the legacy team and how, the King David. Something about the King David, I kind of went blank after he said, the Old Testament, you need to have all the rich people be able to give, and, the more they give, the farther the kingdom can go, blah, blah, blah.
What?
And, yeah, it was like their vision, it was something about the King David had the wealthy people, and the wealthy people helped move the church along farther. Like, back, that was the gist I got out of the conversation I got from Pastor, is that's how they based the legacy
that's
team,
how
how
they
came up. King David, in their times, that they had to have the wealthy people give also, and the kings and stuff like that. I kind of just went blank afterwards.
Okay. So let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
Because
Well, go ahead.
No, what were you going to say?
Just say, first of all, King David wasn't a pastor. He didn't have a church.
No.
He was a king of a nation. It's just, I'm sorry.
It's flawed.
I'm not going to get on my soapbox, but it's just another example of just verse grabbing stuff that has nothing to do with anything.
Exactly.
And building a doctrine or whatever off of it.
But this is what they build it off of, right? That's what they build this whole idea of legacy, is that, okay, these are kings like King David's men that were wealthy that helped him along, and so they use this. This is a kind of some hidden scriptures in 2 Samuel, and the idea is there was a guy. His name was
Godzilla.
Barzillai or something like that. Barzillai. And he was a wealthy man. And when David was running away from Absalom for a time, this man decided to throw his loyalty behind David and care for him. And it did cost money to care for him during that time. And then when Absalom died, this is the second part, right? When Absalom died and David was going back, before he crossed the river to go back to his kingdom, he asked Barzillai, he said, "Hey, you've done so much for us. I would love for you to come and take part in the kingdom and take a leadership role in the kingdom, basically." Here's what they don't leave. This is what they leave out. Barzillai said, "I'm good. I've got wealth. I'm cool. I don't need the place at the table."
And you know why he said that? Because that's the gift of giving. The gift of giving is no strings attached.
It requires nothing.
When you have the gift of giving, you give it freely, and there's no strings attached, and there's no benefit to yourself.
Yep.
That's not what's happening in a lot of these situations. And I think listening to that interview, it just made me really sad, and it also made me really angry, because what I want to tell this guy is, like, you have a legacy. You said you've been there before day one. You've been serving every single week, year after year after year after year, and that is a legacy. But he was made to feel lesser than because he's not a part of this inner circle that's been created. So it's literally causing division within the body.
Yep.
I just think it's interesting that the example used is of a man who wasn't a pastor trying to build a church. It was a king obviously he was running for Absalom, but his goal in life, even though he was a man after God's own heart, like people want to say, was still to expand his kingdom in his wealth. Mm-hmm. So
Very interesting.
Interesting.
Kind of different, isn't it?
Yeah, or the same.
Well, got you.
You
I'm
know
just
what I mean?
saying, yeah, it should be different. The
Yeah.
church should be different, but that's kind of how we've turned this into our
Well,
own
and this
fiefdoms.
it's this type of stuff that gets the church a bad rap.
Yeah.
It's like, stop the insanity.
Like, why are you doing this?
Like, why are you doing this? This is why only 15% of people pay tithes, because they don't trust.
Well, and I
because
think
there's no transparency.
I think this too, like I'm having clarity, like this is why I'm sitting here
Yeah.
today and having these conversations because I was a part of this problem too. I was this guy's pastor. My husband, ex-husband, and I pastored him, loved him dearly. I can speak for Jeremy on this part too. We loved him dearly. He helped build the church. We wouldn't have
Like
a church.
literally.
Yeah, we wouldn't even have a church without pulling those trailers.
Yeah.
And so it makes me angry. It breaks my heart, and it makes me angry also. But I think, I was a part of the problem. I did not question this. I didn't question this. This plan was rolled out.
Yeah.
This is how we do it. This is how we accomplish what we are setting out to accomplish. This is how we build the kingdom. And I never questioned it. I drank the Kool-Aid just like I think, Pastor has, drunk the Kool-Aid. Because sitting on this couch and listening to him talk, I'm sitting here with egg on my face. Like, really? Like, oh my gosh. That guy should have been at the head table. Yeah. No matter, I don't care, you don't give at all. Like right. You've given of your time, you've given so much already to the kingdom of God to help us build this church. Yep. And I'm sitting over here
talking about a gift of giving.
It. Yes. I mean, you have it. It breaks my heart.
Yeah. And that's where this is wrong. Right? Yeah. Where this is wrong is you've got this guy and he has this conversation and finds out, well, this is, the idea is Barzilla's and that sort of thing. And what actually happens, and we won't listen to the whole thing right now, but what actually happens is he's told, essentially, well, you're not a Barzilla. Even though you're able to give this amount of money. And by the way, it got raised from $10,000 to $20,000.
Which as a senior pastor, I had no idea. So I think people come in with these big ideas for churches, okay? They come in, they roll out their ideas, and as senior pastors, we're like, okay, this church is doing this, let's adopt that.
Sounds good,
and
right?
then there's so many different people. We're handing it off to somebody and said, hey, take the wheels on this. Not to say we're passing, like I'm not trying to say it's not on us, because it's definitely on us. Like we should have done more research. But I had no idea. We kept raising that bar, that it was so hard.
5,000, 10,000, 20,000. Well, and here's the other thing, and you said this before, and I think
I had no idea the language that was the whole deal about
the kings and stuff.
No idea.
See, I guess that's a script that they're supposed to say. I don't know.
I don't know either.
But you said this before, that it's in a conversation we had about this before. You said when everybody in the room is on the same page and agrees about this thing, we can talk about it all day long and it makes sense to us.
Yeah.
Right? But if you have somebody that has a different perspective, if you have somebody that sits in the room with you and says, but what about people like this or me or like whatever, then you have a better chance at saying, you know what? This sounds like a good idea on the surface, but it's not a good idea down the line because it's going to affect this person, it's going to affect this person, it's going to affect these people.
Well, which is why I think we have a lot of problems that we're having in the church today, is because they are sitting in conference rooms with only people like themselves, pumping each other up, and they don't ever invite other people into, like other people who may challenge them, or they're scared to death.
And I think we can sit here and say whoever came up with this and whoever made these decisions to implement this, it might have been good intentions, and it probably was, but honestly, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Intentions don't mean anything because this is hurtful to people. This is just one example. I'm sure there's thousands of others. but we shouldn't be doing anything in the church that feels exclusionary.
It's a club.
Or
It
exclusive.
is a club.
And
I agree with
listen, I'll just be super transparent. I remember being very frustrated and talking to you about it. Because a lot of those thresholds you were mentioning, our giving was well above it, but we weren't on it.
You weren't asked.
But because we couldn't, we weren't identified.
Well, it's because
we
you didn't
couldn't
have
give
deep
anything.
pockets,
We
right?
couldn't
Let's
give
be real.
anything else.
Let's be real. If you're giving enough to make that threshold, but you can't
We don't
afford to
have-
give more,
we don't
and
have
that this is a
status.
sacrifice for you.
There was
it.
no
That's
status.
it. It was a sacrifice for us to give what we gave, but it wasn't something that we could maintain. But the people that could, I mean, let's just peel it back a little bit. Honestly, whether the intentions were good when it started or not, somewhere along the way, people just leaned into the fact that people of means and people of privilege, and that doesn't mean they're bad people. There are plenty of people that have a lot of money that are good people, but they like to be special.
Yeah,
They like special clubs.
I do.
They like access.
right.
And so what you're really playing into with Legacy Team, it is zero to do with gift of giving and everything to do with, we know you like to feel like you're special.
Yeah.
And
You're
so we're
not
going
wrong,
to create
Jason.
this,
Yeah.
we're going to create this thing. And so now just like you feel when you walk into your country club.
It's entitlement, right?
Yeah, it's entitlement, it's privilege.
And that's not for everybody, but that's for a lot of people.
So
that-
we
that-
might could hit a threshold, but we're not members of that type of club.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, we were members enough to play guitar at them or serve at them. But you know what I'm saying? It's then that's why, could have gave $100,000.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have mattered because he's just, I don't know what the
Well,
right way to say
the word
it
he
is.
used was he's not one of the cool kids.
Yeah,
That's
it's a
what he said.
club.
He
It's
said that's what I felt like. I didn't
100%
feel
a
like I
club.
was one of the cool kids, and so
It
Well,
had zero to do with
I don't think I ever felt that way anyway.
right. I know.
it had zero to do with dollar amount and everything to do with like status.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. You're right.
And it is a pay to play mentality.
Yeah.
It's if you give, you get access.
Well, and then on the flip side, there are tons of people of means that do have the gift of giving and that give without any expectation.
Right. They're
And,
truly Barzillians,
I mean,
right?
I can think of one person in a church that I worked at that was actually the number one giver that never asked for seats reserved, never asked for anything. And I believe it's because he really did have the gift of giving.
Yeah,
Like,
that's the way it should be.
And that is the way it should be. And there are people like that. But what this model caters to is the other kind, typically.
Yeah. Well, and let's be honest, if you're giving to receive something, you're not giving at
it's
all.
not giving, you're buying.
Yeah, that's not giving.
It's buying access.
You have the gift of buying.
And even if you look at their strategy, I mean, I'm like, it's funny because I remember, and lots of churches do different things like this, and they have these giving campaigns, and it would always frustrate me, especially when we were a lot younger with little kids and we didn't have a lot of money, and we don't have a lot of money now.
No,
but,
we don't.
I was like, why do they always do this in December? Like, they're asking for this sacrificial giving, and I'm trying to get Christmas presents for my kids.
Yeah.
And that might be the wrong thought. I might be being selfish and in my flesh right now. But then as I, got a little wiser, I was like, oh, it's because it's the end of the year, and they think people will do a tax write-off. People will give generously at the end of the year because they can get a tax write-off. No, there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, even the way they cater the campaign and program, they're not thinking about a single mom on a fixed income that's trying to buy Christmas presents, and now you're going to feel guilty because you don't have margin to give above and beyond in the month of December.
Yeah, I mean,
Very
what
true.
what would be wrong with doing that in February or March or some other time of the year?
Or April when people get their tax returns.
Or April. There you go.
Think smarter, not harder.
There you go.
Somebody's going to do a campaign next April. Watch.
And here's another part of this. The other part, the danger of this legacy team model driving your church, the vision of the church forward, is that then not only do the higher givers have access to the pastor, more access to the pastor, which is unbiblical, fully unbiblical, but not only that, but they also they also expect something from the pastor, not just access, but now the church is driven by mammon and money and not by ministry, because now you can't say things that need to be said.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna say this. When there is a need for justice to be spoken over the platform, okay, but you have rich old white Republican men that are giving the most money, you can't afford to say certain things that may upset them, because now if you upset them, they don't give anymore.
They become the filter.
And your vision
Well,
is affected.
It's because whoever has access has influence.
Exactly. And that's exactly right. And so now, if there's a race situation that comes up, you can't say something about racial justice in any situation, because your rich white Republican giving base is going to have a problem. Now you are being driven by money. You're no longer driven by what is correct and what is proper and what is right. Now you're driven by money, and you have to make those decisions based on that in order to keep everything moving forward.
Yeah.
It's
Then
not
it's
just race.
No, it's not just race. I'm using that as an
Oh,
example.
I know, but you're just making me think. I mean, it's happening all over. I mean, we're seeing it right now. It's women in ministry.
Yes.
It's, a bunch of older white men think that's wrong, and whether or not I know how you guys feel about it, but whether or not however your listeners, fall, it's wrong,
Oh, it's wrong.
And so we're seeing a lot of bad behavior. We're seeing abuse in the church, sexual abuse in the church, and how people are just, they're, shut up and be quiet. I feel like it's a good old boys club.
Well,
It is.
And they start, listen, could go on a whole thing right here.
Go for it.
This is also, just think about all these NDAs flying around left and right.
Yep.
NDAs and a check, because money is your number one value. Well, money is not my number one value. So I want to make sure y'all hear me. Money's not my number one value.
Right.
So a check ain't going to do it, buddy.
Yeah. Yep.
It just makes me think I don't know. It's just,
I feel you.
I see a lot of people hurting, like when you talk about injustice, period.
Yeah.
Like, as a church, we should rescue
Yeah.
the hurting. We should surround the hurting. Instead, we don't talk about it, or we shove them out of our doors. We slap an NDA on them. We give them some money, some hush money, and we just don't want anything to do with them. We treat them like they had a disease instead of pulling them close. And I don't understand that.
And what we listened to a little social media clip just a minute ago, and he said the primary responsibility for the church in situations like this is justice and accountability.
Yes.
And yet we do the very opposite in these cases. And
Because they want it to be business as usual.
Well,
they don't want
and-
anything to ruffle their feathers. They want to keep what they have going.
Yeah.
They keep their club going. They're very comfortable.
Yeah.
They're very comfortable, and they don't want anybody
Don't
to
rock the
come
boat.
in and rock the boat.
It's that.
Ever.
And we talked about it in the last episode a little bit. It's all about protecting personal kingdoms.
Yes.
Personal interests.
Personal interests, personal ambitions above all else.
Yeah.
Everything else. And everything that's, even when something is done to try and maybe placate, it still somehow builds that.
Right.
It's never,
it's optics.
yeah, it's optics. It's never sincere.
Trigger.
It's never
Trigger
since,
warning.
if you do talk about issues like we're talking right now, then you have, we're labeled as people who are trying to tear the church down.
Yeah.
It's like, if you're not building, then you're tearing. And it's like, no, it's quite the opposite. Like, we've been a part of things, and everybody knows I was a part of Hope City. I'm not just calling, like, I have seen churches,
Yes.
not
Yeah.
just Hope City.
Yeah.
And so it's actually like, we're just trying to bring awareness that these situations have gone on for long enough.
And you know what's actually tearing the church down? These situations.
These situations.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. And that guy said it before. But it's like, at what point do we think that telling the truth is going to hurt the church?
That's the
Yeah.
thing. It's not about tearing the church down. It's about what you're saying might expose people to the truth of like things that are going on.
Yes.
They're not concerned with the church at all.
No.
It's concerned with how it can reflect on them and what they're trying to accomplish for themselves.
Exactly.
And it's just the building up of themselves, the building up of their own kingdom. And I think that's why I'm so frustrated, because when you talk about legacy, I just keep going back to, the access part of it, and what, like, these people, like the access they have. And yes, we're giving them access. But the ones who really need the access, the single moms and the widows and the people who have been abused, the people who have been mistreated, they're not being left
Yeah,
on.
they're getting tackled by security in the back hallway before they ever get to the staircase.
Well, that person needed to be tackled.
Well, that was all different.
We're not talking about the streaker.
No, I'm just talking about anybody.
Yeah.
It can't even get through the pipe and drape.
No,
Yeah.
you can't. Right, the access is limited unless you have means.
To the
And
Holy of Holies. if
I
you
am
will.
never, and I've said this before, and I talked a little bit about the church that we're a part of now, but I'll never go to a church again where I can't have access to the pastor, because that every person should have access to the pastor. And I think about, I am in this scenario, since we're going there, this pastor I knew my whole life. And it was hard for me to get access. I actually had to join the staff.
Yeah.
And then that didn't work out either.
That didn't work out so well.
But yeah, and it's hard. These conversations are hard, but they're important, because listen, there's so much distrust for the church. People aren't giving. And I could sit here, we could talk all day about just the evidence of God's faithfulness and his blessings on us. And a lot of that is due to our tithing. And I'm not saying like you give to get, but God always comes through.
He does. He
and
honors that.
He honors it. I absolutely believe it. So I'm not against giving. I'm for it. And I wish that more people would give to their church. But I think it's situations like this that make people so leery. And I mean, even when you see all the stuff that's going on right now, I mean, Hillsong is about to be for financial fraud and all kinds of stuff. Because we got the widow's mite wasn't for private flights, y'all.
Bars.
And that's not just in Hillsong.
No, it's not. And
it's
so
not.
it's
everywhere.
It's everywhere. And it's like,
That's to East Texas sometimes. But.
Well, literally, like, you're talking about Hillsong. It's just, I think the reason why these conversations are so important, it's easy for someone, Brian Houston, to go on Instagram and say, he openly talked about flights and how he would not do things any differently. When you're on the inside, when you're on the inside, I know what he's saying, and I don't agree with him. It may sound.
He wouldn't do anything different.
He said he would not do anything differently. And $17,000 for a flight. I've flown to Australia. I flew to Australia several times, not for Hillsong. And the last time I went, I was 6 months pregnant, and I sat in coach. Was it comfortable? It wasn't terrible, like those flights aren't always full, but for me to sit there and say first class $17,000
and justify it
and then, like, I can tell you right now from experience, he did not pay for that personally. I don't buy that. But I just think these conversations are needed, because somebody's not telling the truth.
And here's how I feel. Like, I'm the type of person, my old boss, she listens to the podcast, but she used to always say, man, you're just telling yourself. And that's what I feel like these conversations are, because if not, we're going to let we're going to let Netflix documentaries and everything else have the narrative of what's happening in the church. I'd much rather stand up and say, hey, we have a problem that we need to address and we need to talk about. And like, we've all been
behaving badly.
Literally,
that's what we have.
That's what it is. We could have a whole, remember, girls behaving badly.
It's
pastors going wild.
Pastors
We've got
behaving
pastors
badly.
gone wild
Yeah.
out here. And it's like, how can you justify that amount for a flight?
Well, but here's the thing too. I will give you $17,000 if that flight costs $17,000. It may be on paper as $17,000,
But this
a lot of that probably went
happens.
into a
But no,
little bank account
but
somewhere.
okay.
Very possible.
I will speak to that. That happens.
I know.
Yeah.
My
I know.
husband was given a Harley Davidson that I had to write a check for after I was told this was going to be given to him, which I didn't even understand why it was given to him. He was given a Harley Davidson by another pastor. I had to write a check for that, to my surprise. And my then husband said, "Oh, well, I'm going to go preach for him. And in return, a check will be written to me." I'm sorry.
Wait,
Is
what?
that legal?
No, and
It sounds like money laundering or something.
And here's the thing too, and you go back to
Wow, I did not know that story.
We talked about
Oh, yes.
the people not trusting the
My
church.
eye is twitching.
Listen, people shouldn't trust blindly anymore. It's just
No,
too much
they
out there.
shouldn't.
It's just too much out there, and the church should be working that much harder.
Right. So what about ruthless transparency with finances?
Mm-hmm.
What about doing that?
Because
What about any
Any
any transparency
Yeah.
with finances? Like, come on. When I was a kid, I'm pulling a full Mike Tominello. Remember when there was business meetings? When
Yes.
churches had their annual business
And they
meetings?
could ask any questions?
Remember when they
can't do that, though.
released actual like giving
Yep.
and in finances? It's like there's no transparency whatsoever.
Y'all remember the boards? The old
Yes.
boards that they would say last week's
Y'all know my
offerings?
church. Y'all know my church does
I don't
that.
go that far
Well,
back in church.
hey,
This is
no,
all
but
new
here-
to
My
me.
church does that right now.
Yeah.
My church puts the giving up
Yeah.
every single week.
you can't have you could have those boards. You just have to have somebody double count the attendance.
You're so stupid.
Double counted.
But
don't know.
this just fires me up because I'm like, people are giving,
God.
they're
They're giving them-
sacrificing,
yeah.
and they're giving in good faith. And y'all are all writing a book and going to preach for each other in your little circle
Okay,
and
yeah,
getting rich off of it.
Can we talk about that for a second
Oh,
too?
you
got
Because
speaking
that's
contracts.
a whole other thing, right? Is this I almost used a term
Yeah,
I
don't
shouldn't
use that.
But it's this group of guys that preach at each other's churches.
The boys
and
group.
and they get paid $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 to speak at this
Somebody
church.
just
and
spit out their chicken.
And it,
Yeah.
and guess what? It comes out of the ministry account. I mean, the missions account. It comes out of the missions account, and they go preach there. And then you know what? They have their friend come and preach at their church, and they give them the same amount, and it comes out of the church's missions account. And guess what? We're all $30,000 richer
Yeah.
for
And then
going and preaching one
and
time.
then they stay, and they all use the same sermon too. They only got one sermon. They preach everywhere they go, and they stay in
five-
5-star hotels and rack up $1,000 bills. And I'm just like, at what point are we going to say, hey, like this ain't of God?
Like,
this
who-
is excess. And I'm not against having nice things. I'm not against pastors having nice things.
No.
I want them to live a good life, a comfortable life. It's hard work.
But not at the
expense of your church.
Not at the
If
expense
you
of
don't have a
missions and-
building
Yes.
and you're paying $20,000 for a private flight, what is wrong with you?
Yeah. Well, not to mention that, but what about your staff?
But Natalie, the
your
rest
staff
of the
is-
pastor is so
It's so
important.
important.
And it's so important that when they travel somewhere and they have to get off that plane and immediately go preach, they are well rested. They don't need to be back in coach.
You're right.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when they preach the same sermon everywhere they go. I mean, it's on a T-shirt for crying out loud.
I'll kid you not though. Like it's a problem.
It is.
It's a problem I will never forget. We went and preached for a well-known pastor, and we, you know, as we're leaving, we wanted to leave a gift for this pastor, and the pastor and his wife weren't even there, but we wanted to leave a gift, and so on our way out of town, I was like, let's go get them some watches, you know? And so we went to an outlet, and at that time, like Movado, which is still, it's a wonderful watch.
it's a
I
good
have a Movado watch. I love it. And I was like, let's get my Movado watch. Like, this was a stretch for, like, this is hot. Like,
Yeah.
we're, you know, living large. And so we went and got Movado watches from an outlet place, and we got it gift wrapped, and the pastors weren't there, and so we gave it to the person who was driving us, and we're like, would you please give this to the pastor and his wife? It's Movado watches. Do you think that they will like it? And he literally said, they don't wear anything but Gucci.
Oh, dear God. You got to be kidding.
No. And I can't tell you. Now, I don't want to put that back on the pastors because, again, like we had people say things.
Crazy stuff, yeah.
Speak things for us that I found out later, and I just wanted to die because I'm like, that's not who we were. No. But I can't tell you that was the last time something like that ever happened to me. And what I saw while I was in the ministry, it was a lot of that. It was a lot of, okay, I'm going to come preach for you, and I'm going to treat you this way because I expect that in return. And it just starts this chain reaction of everyone is scratching everybody.
Well, some of them even have contracts. They have speaking contracts with minimum honorariums included. And I've
even heard them say, I won't even get out of the bed for less than this.
I won't get out of the bed for less than $10,000. There has to be a first class flight. Like, it has to be a 4-star or above hotel.
We're making some enemies today.
Like, I mean,
but Richie,
it is what it is.
At what point do we just admit that they're not pastors? They're just like scam artists.
Well, let me tell you this.
But Richie just brought up a point, and this has been my major concern because so many people have put on so much pressure on me, even throughout this whole journey of, Jen, you've really handled this with so much grace. You've been so gracious and kind, and I've really tried to steward everything really, really well. I really want to do this the right way, but it also, my justice is way up here, and my blood is boiling because even while I was a pastor's wife and I did not do everything right, I made so many mistakes that now looking back, I'm like, Jen, you really dropped the ball, but I also questioned so much during my time.
Yes, you did.
And it was always met with literally a ridiculous answer that just, it's just BS. And I think that we have to, people might be disappointed because there are people out there who look at us and like, you're tearing down the church. I don't want to tear down the church. I love the church. I'm so angry that this is happening.
At the spirits. This is
happening.
Right. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and all the other things that he lists. This is a spirit. It's a spirit of mammon that has to be addressed in the church. This is not about...
Because there are good pastors out there who love their congregation and love people
and
who
are transparent.
And really want to do things the right way. They don't
100%.
have to wear All Saints and Gucci and Prada, and their goal is not to be on sneakers for preachers and all this, but there's other pastors out there. That's their goal.
Yeah. So what we're talking about here, though, it's like 0.001% to do with the church. And everything to do with like these individuals and this culture, spirit, whatever you want to call it. Church isn't really a part of that. The church is their means to
taking
wealth and fame.
Of the church,
and I saw this was in a post, and I think we saw the video about the guy who was a musician or whatever with Jeremy Riddle and that whole thing. And this was a response on that post, and the guy said. And at first I was like, oh, here we go. But it was the guy saying, like it or whether you want to hear it or not, the church is built very much like a capitalistic structure system, just gathering wealth and power for the people in power. And I was like, oh, here we go with it. But then the more I thought about it, I was like, well, it's not wrong.
It's what the celebrity culture has done. I think I said this on a podcast before. Listen, I'm a pastor's kid. You are a pastor's kid. Was anybody dying to be a pastor in the 80s? Heck no. You're working yourself to death. It's nonstop, and it's very little pay. So, it's this celebrity culture. And I used to have a pastor that said there's no such thing as a celebrity pastor. You can either be a celebrity or you can be a pastor. And I believe that. And he did too. Because once he felt like a celebrity, he gave up any illusion of trying to pastor.
Yeah. Well, no, it's true. And when was it cool?
Mic drop.
it used to not be cool to be a pastor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I think it attracts people because it's like the cool thing. You can do this, you can get approved by this organization. They'll give you all the systems and the signage, and you can throw a thing up, and then who knows, maybe you'll get to go to the meeting of all the other mega church pastors with the mega church pastor. And then maybe you'll get even cooler, and you and your other really cool mega church pastors can go sit in the mega church pastor's dining room. And
have access to
is he going to teach you how
John
to be
Maxwell.
Is he going to teach you how to be a mega church pastor? How is this helping the kingdom of God? No, it's just building.
Yeah.
It's building personal kingdoms.
And let me add to this. It's not all mega churches either, because I grew up in a place where there were lots of churches in our organization, and the majority of those churches, they had a little tiny office in the church for the pastor that was just a tiny room that was never visited by the pastor.
Yeah.
Because the pastor took 100% of the tithe and lived on a ranch out in somewhere that nobody had access to.
A lot of your smaller churches.
And a lot of the smaller churches
are 100%
do the same
tithers.
thing, because they take 100%
Wait a
of the
second.
tithe.
Hold on.
Yes.
You missed it.
Yes.
Y'all missed it. Y'all could have taken 100% of the tithe everywhere.
You're
you went.
telling me my dad could have taken 100% of that 10%?
A lot of your smaller churches.
Hey, seriously,
will.
my dad, when
How
my
did the
dad
church
started
run?
pastoring,
They kept the
off of
lights on.
offerings.
So you're getting.
So there's
kept
tithing
the
and
lights
offering,
Hold
right?
on, let me do the
They
math.
kept the lights
You're
on.
getting 100% of the 10% from the 15%.
Yes.
Is this right? Okay, all right. Just want to make sure I got
But
it.
in those situations, if you,
It's a lot
it was
higher
a lot higher
giving.
because it was taken note, and you had
Reprimanded.
There were boards where this person didn't pay their tithe this week that showed
Oh,
like
yeah.
literally.
Did they
some
also
of
get
those-
100% of the sheaves, or just is
No,
it just the tithes?
just
Okay.
a tithe, just a tithe. But for real, my dad
Wow.
pastored a church that when we first came in, the former pastor had gotten 100% of the tithe, and my dad was like, "There is no way I'm taking that."
But you could also
Like,
get the church
there's
to
no way.
You could also get the church to build you a parsonage, so you can
Yeah.
live there.
So
for
what I'm
free.
Stayed
saying
with a few of
is,
those.
mammon is a problem regardless
Yeah.
of your small church or large church.
Yes, true, true.
It's a problem because people are, if you want to be super rich or well off, you can become a pastor and take 100% of the tithe, or you can go speak at people's
And
places.
as we
So you do have
speak-
an opportunity.
As we speak
You wanna do
right
that.
now, I could hear the ridicule. I could hear someone like Christine Kane, who I love, by the way, getting up at a conference and speaking about somebody like me sitting on this couch. And all I want to say to a Christine Kane right now is, you've never been a pastor of a church. You don't know.
Yeah.
I know.
Yep.
I've been there, I've lived it, I've seen it, I was a part of it,
Yep.
and I'm sickened by it. Do we talk about it? Or do we not? Do we talk about it and like get it all out in the open so that we can have change come, so that we can hopefully speak to the hearts of men and actually do some good here? Or do we not talk about it for the fear of somebody talking about us, making us look bad, for the fear of, like the Bible says, do not hurt these little ones who are getting hurt anyway,
Yeah.
because this kind of stuff keeps happening?
Right.
What do we do?
We have to have these conversations.
to.
They have to happen. If we don't do it, just like we said a second ago, if we think telling the truth is going to hurt the church, then
Yeah.
we've got a problem.
Yeah.
Because the truth should be the saving grace of the church.
Yeah.
Truth can't hurt the church.
It can't.
Well, and in the grand
It can hurt
scheme
the people that are running the church.
And people using the church
And
for
it
their
can
own
turn
means.
people off of
Yes.
church. And that,
Yeah.
I think that's why for me it's so hard to have the struggle, because I know it can turn people away from church. I get it. But like, the church is not the problem.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
Jason
no, the church
said.
is not the problem.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you right now, in a conversation like this, there's not a lot of non-church people that are listening to this conversation
Yeah.
anyway.
There's not.
We're
Yeah.
talking to ourselves here.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
We're
Well,
talking to
and
ourselves.
then here's the thing: there are tons of churches that probably do have financial transparency.
Yeah.
They do have like governance and accountability and pastors that are doing the right thing. Like I know pastors like that.
Yes,
I've
I
been
do
to
too.
their churches. I know that exists. Unfortunately, there's no Netflix documentary about it.
Yeah.
There's
exactly.
only the scandals. And so then we have all of these eyes on these big situations, and then it brings it out to everybody else. So it's like, do you want the world talking about it? Do you want a Vanity Fair article? Or do we want to try to solve this like amongst ourselves and have conversations and try to get people's attention and say, hey, here's the, like, these are some really big opportunities. What do we do?
That's such a great way of looking at it too, Natalie, because that scripture that a lot of pastors like to use whenever we're having open discussions like this, it's like, well, you're supposed to do this in private. You're supposed to have a conversation. You're supposed to go to the person that's caused the offense and
Well,
have
my
a conversation.
goodness,
You have to be
I've
able-
done that so many times.
On a macro level, that's what we're doing right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On a macro, we're talking to ourselves here. We're not talking. We're
Well,
not.
and we've all admitted we've been a part of it.
Yes.
Yeah,
We've
well,
all been sucked
And you know what?
into it.
We've all benefited from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
Oh,
well,
I've benefited the most
We've
sitting
all
right
been.
here.
and also
from
to
it,
have
yes.
those conversations, you'd have to join the legacy team. So
Point taken. Point taken.
But we have had those conversations. I mean, Natalie, you and I mean, you were our executive assistant when I was a senior pastor, and we've had the hard conversations. We've gone to the right people out of pure frustrations, and every time we spoke up and we said something about it, we were either told to be quiet or we were given a most ridiculous
Excuse.
Pat answer.
excuse like the one I just gave you about, well, the pastor needs to be well rested, so instead of taking the 3-hour drive down to East
Yeah.
Texas, let's
We'll
put
just
him
do
on
a
a
private
$20,000 private flight. I mean, it is what it is.
Jeez.
It is, and then you just walk away and your head's spinning and you realize you were just gaslit, but what do you do?
I think part of it too is we talked a little bit about this in the last episode. I feel like I'm a mile away from this.
You're good.
When you're on the inside of it, it's just easy to believe it or easy to convince yourself that it's true. You're like, that sounds ridiculous, but okay.
Yeah.
He's
you
tired.
feel-
He has a global apostolic anointing. How could I ever
You
understand?
just stop.
How could I ever understand
Or
that?
you feel
but I'm being
defeated.
serious.
Feel defeated.
Or
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can tell you, I felt very, very defeated. I literally, I think, there was we could talk, there's several reasons why I kind of stopped showing up in the office, or I pulled, out of a lot of duties at Hope City. And one of the reason why I want to talk about today is because I felt very defeated.
Yeah.
And I felt like I can't do anything anymore.
Yeah.
Like my voice is
Doesn't
not
matter.
being
It's not
heard.
valued.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, then I'm just out.
Well, and ultimately, that's why I left, right? I literally, that was the conversation. I said, my voice isn't valued anymore. The input and the feedback that you used to appreciate from me, you don't want anymore. I can't stay. Like, I'm going to be a fly in the ointment. I'm going to be Absalom. I got to go.
No, because at that point you become a problem.
Yeah.
If they're not going to listen to you, then
Yeah.
you just become a problem. You're labeled, in my case, labeled crazy.
Yeah.
And, so, hey, okay, you do you, boo.
Just go right ahead.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Man.
That's
So,
a whole other. That's a whole other.
That's a
episode,
whole nother
by the
can
way.
of worms.
That's a
We-
whole other, because that I could
Yes.
just literally
Yeah.
go off right now.
yes,
Well,
yes.
go.
And
On
we,
that
and
topic.
we, and
Yeah.
we should.
Yeah.
And we should.
I mean,
On
this is
that
the episode
topic.
for it. We're
Let's talk
definitely
about
going.
devaluing women. Let's talk about, you can sit here and say that you have a special anointing for empowering women in ministry, but you are full of it. Like, when your
how much-
actions do not match it, and when you isolate
Yep.
and you push out and you devalue and disrespect, like,
Well, side note, that is on my list of podcasts for us to talk about. Strong women in ministry. Women in ministry.
Yeah.
Period. And we need to talk about that. And we need to talk about the devaluing of that.
Well, and
Well, I ain't got no kids this week, so
I think
let's go.
I think it's just there's so many things, whether it's what you guys are talking about right now, women in ministry, whether it's legacy, whether it's ABC, XYZ. It's the church just being accountable and owning the shortcomings and working to do better, and instead of just doing everything they can to silence those voices because it might affect their personal bottom line.
Exactly.
I'm running through my head. I can't help it. But whenever I talk like this, I start running through a filter in my head of all the people who are going to have an issue with this. But I also know those people have an issue with things like legacy. They don't know what to do it. When you are in it and you're a part of it, you drink the Kool-Aid, and you don't like it, but you're a part of it. And so what do you do about it? What do you do about it?
Well, I think I said this before, but silence is acceptance. So if you're not going to take a stand, then you agree with it, you're a part of it. That's something that my parents instilled in me my entire life. Like, silence is acceptance. So if you're going to not say anything about it, that means that you accept it and you go along with it.
Well, how do you handle let's not even talk about the church for a second. How do you handle abuse? Sexual abuse. What is the best way to handle sexual abuse, for example, or any kind of physical abuse or child abuse or something like that? You can either not say anything at all, and if you don't say anything at all, you're enabling, or you have the conversations at great personal cost to yourself, but it exposes what needs to be exposed, and you have a better chance of seeing justice served. You don't always see it served, and that's the other part of this, right? Like going back to the church, it's the same thing. How do we respond to this when we see it where we are, right? Wherever you are, if you see this kind of thing, there's only one right answer, and it doesn't feel good, and it's to talk about it. It's to have the conversations, to bring it up, do it in the spirit of conciliation as much as possible, and the right spirit as much as possible, but bring it up and do it boldly, and say, this doesn't seem right to me, this doesn't seem right to me. One of two things is going to happen, right? One of two things is going to happen. You're either going to be blackballed, an X is put on you, and you are out, or there might be a leader that actually goes, you know what? I didn't realize we were doing that. Now, more than likely, it will be the first. All right, just being honest with you.
Because you're dealing with so many narcissists in leadership. I feel like if you're not dealing, you're going to get so much further to sit there and have a conversation and listen to somebody and say, you know what, I am so sorry you feel that way. Like, maybe I need to take a step back and look and reevaluate. To me, you're getting so much further down the road. You talk about abuse, and we all, like you said, everybody listening to this is probably most likely a Christian, and you'd have to be living underneath a rock not to know what's going on with Hillsong. Well, Brian Houston just did this live after this Vanity Fair thing came out, to where he went on this rant about how amazing Hillsong is and how people are trying to tear down the legacy of Hillsong. And he literally went on and on and on about all the wonderful memories of Hillsong and the church and the lives that were saved. And the entire time that I'm listening to this man rant, it is not lost on me, I think 10 or 13, abused victims who have come forward. And I'm thinking, what's their memories, Brian? Because you have all these wonderful, amazing memories.
That you wouldn't change a thing.
That you wouldn't change a thing. But have you ever stopped to think about their memories as a child? Have you ever stopped to think about owning some of that and apologizing and just having a little bit of empathy? No, there's no empathy. It's like, nope, I can't have empathy towards the hurting, towards their stories. It's got to be all about me, because anything less will tear down my kingdom.
Empathy is one of the first things to go when you are devolving into narcissism and into toxicity. It's one of the first things to go, because no longer are you on the same level as anybody else.
And I am so sorry to come out that. I realize that's a very harsh stance.
No.
And I'm not...
You have every right to have that opinion. 100%.
And I don't know Brian Houston, and he's not, like, he's still in the middle of his stuff, and I don't want to take a hard stance on somebody until everything's finished. But as an abuse victim, that just hit me. It just hit me really, like, where's your empathy? You could have empathy
You better.
for somebody, even if you don't fully agree.
You don't have to agree to respect their perspective.
Exactly.
You don't have to. In fact, that's a mark of maturity in general, to be able to say, you have a valid perspective. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I can see your perspective, and then I can learn from it.
I can tell you, 13 grown men aren't lying.
Yeah.
No.
Well, and it's also the thing too. It's just like both things can be true. Like, because obviously there are going to be people that have like wonderful memories of how their life were changed. A Hillsong.
Absolutely.
At the same time, there are these victims that were victimized by his father who don't, and both can be true.
Both.
Like,
I literally had a conversation with somebody just this past weekend, and they said they listened to my podcast, and they said, that is not the same church that I've experienced. And I was like, and that's a valid perspective, because guess what? You didn't have certain access to see that part of it. You got this part, and this part was wonderful.
yeah.
It was great. There was great stuff over
Yes.
here, but there was unhealth over here and toxicity over here. But you didn't experience that. So you can have two very different experiences in
Absolutely.
the same exact situation.
Yeah.
I mean, there are probably still people going to that church that don't have that experience, but they're
Absolutely.
You know
Well,
what I mean?
we did. I mean, even though we were behind the scenes and we were dealing with things on a financial or in a business setting, we could also go into the congregation and get so much
Yeah.
out of worship. And it's, you can hold both at the same time.
Yep.
You absolutely
can.
can. And it's necessary for us to do. It's called non-dualistic thinking. You have to be.
There are shades.
Right.
You know, it's not all black and white, not right or wrong.
Right.
But like, to any situation, there is shades to the color of that situation. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah,
you
it
know what
does.
I'm saying?
it does.
It's not all wonderful or terrible.
Yeah.
There's everything in between.
It's very complex. It's like we talked about. I think an organization can be just like an individual, which is you can be healthy in areas and unhealthy in areas.
Absolutely.
And you can be really healthy in one area, and you can actually be toxic in another area in your own life. Same thing with organizations.
Well, I just heard of a lady talking about her ex-husband on a podcast, and she said, you know, my ex-husband is a wonderful human being. He's not a good father. You know, and I'm like, well, yeah, like I could totally see where somebody can be one thing in one area and something in another.
You're right. You can be. I can be a good father and a terrible husband.
Exactly.
You know, my kids can experience love, and my wife can experience complete opposite situation. It's very possible.
I'm furious when they don't have the capacity to have that empathy, to understand the hurt and what other people have gone through.
Yeah.
Just show a little bit of compassion.
Well, if
when
they
you're saying
acknowledge the
this.
failure, then it tarnishes.
Everything in their mind.
Yeah.
Their optics. It's
In
about
their
optics,
mind.
right? It tarnishes them in their mind. When actually acknowledging it
Gets
it
you
gets
so
you
much
so much
further.
further
Yeah.
because it's
So
a
much
spirit of
further.
humility. That's why David was a man after God's own heart. He would immediately turn his heart when he was corrected. He was screwed up in a lot of areas, like a mess.
Yeah.
But immediately his heart would turn.
It makes you wonder how much, and this isn't a Hillsong or Brian Houston podcast, but just his public issues that he's gone through. You know, he was arrested, drunk driving, all that stuff. It makes you wonder how much of that is like medicating to deal with the
100%.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
All that.
100%.
Absolutely it is.
Which, you know, I just want to say, man, just let some of this go.
Yeah.
Like you could just see it,
Yeah.
you know, but no.
Well, let me say this too. Going back to what do you do about it? You do what you can. You say what you can say. You don't be quiet about it. You don't. That's the worst thing that you can do is just sit back and hope that it's going to get better. No, address it, because here's the thing: when enough people address it, and it becomes clear to the leadership that enough people are seeing this thing, if they have any chance of redemption, they cannot ignore that many people saying it, and they can't just be told, well, that's just that problem. They've got a problem. When you have enough people saying it, they can't ignore it, and now it's in their hands.
How much is enough?
Huh?
How much is enough?
I don't know. 2. The Bible says where 2 or 3 what's the word? Out of the mouth of 2 or 3, let every word be established. Right? So if you have 2 or 3 people that are coming to you with the same issue, then you need to start looking deeply into what's going on in your organization or in your own life. And if you're not willing to do that, then there's probably not a lot of hope for you. And for those of you who are actually the ones bringing it to them, if you have 2 or 3 people that have the same issue that are talking to them and they're not doing anything about it, run.
Leave.
Run.
Leave immediately.
Get out.
Leave.
Don't give your money. Don't do anything. Get away from that, because that is a toxic organization. Leave it.
Or
don't hope it gets better.
Or if the only people that can bring those issues up had to pay $50,000 to have the conversation, leave.
Leave too. Yeah, because if you can't
just to bring it back to the legacy.
Yeah, exactly. If you can't hit that $20,000 threshold and you don't have the opportunity to have those conversations, you don't need to be there.
Yeah.
You don't need to be there.
It's so funny we talk about that. You know, I won't, you know, you brought up John Maxwell, and I just remember like we had to pay a large amount just to be a part of in his leadership, to be mentored to him. And it's just, it's
you mean
hilarious.
You had to pay for mentorship?
We had to pay for mentorship. And it's the stories we tell ourselves, right?
Yeah.
I will never forget, you know, my ex being giddy over his relationship with John, almost like he's a grandfather. And I reminded him, probably sarcastically, reminded him, well, you know, you're paying for that, right? You know, but it's like he never looked at it like that. It's
These
like
guys get 5 figures a month for that.
Oh no, it was a lot more than 5 figures, and not money out of our pocket.
Well,
because again, that would come out of emissions, because you know, he set up his organization as this will be a part of like a global missions, when it wasn't really. I mean, not really. Like these men are smart. They're really, really smart. And so I think the whole...
If smart means manipulative.
It's very... it's all got to come tumbling down.
It does.
It's okay when you do it. Like, we have these things in corporate settings, and that is...
expected.
Oh, it's expected, and it's okay.
I heard somebody say, Dr. Ramani is somebody I love to listen to. She's got some Navigating Narcissism. It's a great podcast, by the way. One of the things she says is, in a church... in a corporation, I kind of expect there to be narcissistic leaders
100%.
Because they're the ones that can make it run. But in a church, this is a different thing, and it shouldn't be that way.
Well, I think that might be a whole other podcast. But you know those diagrams where you have like the boxes at the bottom, like just say, for instance, should be a pastor, shouldn't be a pastor.
Yeah.
So you have here, do you love people? Arrow, should be a pastor.
Right.
Do you want to serve God's kingdom? Arrow, should be a pastor.
Yeah.
Do you want to be famous? Or do you want to be famous? Shouldn't be a pastor. Do you want to be rich? Should it be, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
But it's kind of that thing. It makes you wonder, like, how many pastors, air quotes again, are really pastors. Or,
Well, I've already
It's just
said
a
it in
means to an
another
end. Oh, did you?
episode. Like,
Yeah.
we have a lot of pastors who are duping us.
Yeah.
A lot of them. Like, they want to be famous. They
Yeah.
want to be known for something, but they can't cut it out in the real world. And so,
Yeah.
or this is all they've ever known.
Or this is a great environment for them to manipulate and to take. I mean, it's very easy for that. to
Robert
happen.
Morris says manipulation is witchcraft.
Well,
It is.
There you go.
It is.
Ooh, that opened up a whole thing.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Sorry, didn't mean to go off on
No, you're right.
it. But
You're right. But you know, this, to get back to this one point, when the disciples started protecting Jesus, they started putting this circle around Jesus and gating access to him. And
What
then
did he do, Richie?
These little kids.
What did Jesus
What?
do?
These little kids tried to come up, and the disciple says, "No, you can't." And he said, "Let them in. Suffer the little children. Let the children come to me, and don't forbid them, because this is the kingdom of heaven." And then after they left, the kids had plenty of time. After they left, and Jesus rebuked the disciples for that, because they were trying to manage access
But
to
we
him.
we got pastors that think they're busier than Jesus.
Okay, I have an idea.
What's that?
I think the "What Would Jesus Do" bracelets need to come back,
Yes.
and we need to manufacture them and just send them out. Every pastor we know.
Yes.
No,
I
seriously.
support that.
How would Jesus lead?
What would Jesus do?
Listen,
Or leadership.
don't get me started on leadership and the
Leadership.
over glorification,
The idolization of
the
leadership.
idolization of leadership. Literally, it is the golden calf of the church.
But
right now.
And
like-
that's another podcast.
But
And-
how can that be though when most leaders aren't leading anyone?
Jason.
Because we have put so much stock
Yep.
and we're looking for every answer in a John Maxwell book and not the book. And so we've put so much importance. We put so much importance on leadership that, we're actually not leading anyone because we're spending all our time trying to be a great leader when we have an awesome example.
But
Jesus
of a
actually
leader.
didn't lead, he discipled.
Did the Bible call like pastors, and I know it's not really a direct like 1v1 comparison between what the Bible would have called a pastor or a church
Right.
leader and what a pastor is now. But does the Bible say they have to be great leaders?
No.
You just have to like love people and disciple people and like point people to Jesus. You don't necessarily have to, in the way that we think of a great leader.
No, in fact, the majority of the people that that God used throughout the Bible were the opposite of great
They were terrible leaders. They were a
terrible
full-on
leaders.
mess.
You look, Gideon was a coward. David
Still
was a
hope for me.
shepherd,
Yeah.
right? David was a shepherd.
Shepherd, king, adulterer.
Moses was a stutterer who couldn't do anything.
who also tried to give
who
his
also-
wife to a king.
Yeah, I mean, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, no, they were not great leaders.
Peter,
you know who
a
was
mess.
a great leader? Saul was a great leader. Saul was a great leader,
Yeah.
and that's what the people wanted instead of the theocracy that they had. They wanted a king. So God gives them Saul, and look at Saul. Saul was one of the most toxic leaders in the Bible.
I think there's two sides to it too. I'm going to smack this microphone 20 times. I think there is a thing too where the day that we live in, I think people kind of like having that guy and not an actual pastor though.
Yes.
And I think there are some
I
people that
agree
want a
with you.
pastor.
Yeah.
But
I
I
agree
think some
with
people,
you. I agree.
they want the stories and the scripture and let
And
me
the sticky
feel
statements
good and
and-
I'll go home, but I don't really want somebody in my life because don't start messing with my mess.
Right, because we play
No,
as
they-
much a
they
part. We
live
play
it.
a big part in building this
Yeah.
culture.
Jeremy used to say, I feel like a dancing monkey on the
Yeah.
stage. He's like, I feel like they want a dancing monkey on the stage.
And a lot of them did.
They do. And they want you to be on like Real Housewives or whatever
Yeah.
the preacher's thing. Like my preacher's rolling. Like I feel like a lot of people play to that.
Yeah.
Mercy, what kind of a screwed up world are we in? Jeez,
I don't know.
Louise.
That's a good question to ask. Come Jesus, quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Pick me up, Lord. I'm tired of this.
Beam me up, Scotty.
That's what my mom said.
Hey, I think the only answer to this is conversations.
Yeah.
Open communication and address it, talk about it, and you know what? Oh boy, so many people are going to say, no, that's the wrong thing to do. You're not supposed to touch not mine anointed, do my prophets no harm.
Oh no, it's gonna get preached about it.
This is going to be that is so out of context in the first place. But yeah, I know. Did you just say?
Hey,
what I
but you
just
know,
said? Did I
but
just heard you?
it's okay though because that assumes anointing.
Ooh, there you go. Well, that's a thing. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
There's another.
Just a little
There's another.
salty.
So
Hey, this might be my last one, so I
you
gotta.
know, whatever.
Go
Just,
ahead,
we're
Jason.
going
You're
all in,
done.
right?
You're done to do it.
Shoot your shot. Oh no, but that's the answer. I mean, the only answer is the more that this is exposed, the more that the Spirit is exposed, then the more likely it is that it is going to be uncovered and addressed. Until we have these conversations, nothing's going to be done. Nothing's going to change. And again, it may come at personal cost to you. It may. It came at personal cost to all of us, didn't it?
Yeah.
To have these
Yes,
kinds
it
of
did.
conversations, the personal cost that we've had to go through it to do this.
Yep.
It is the same thing. It may come at personal cost, but if is the kingdom of God worth that? I think it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
Well,
it
I
is.
mean,
Yeah.
that's how I can, that's how I can sleep at night because I know I did everything that I could in my power
Yeah.
to say what needed to be said to the people that needed to hear it. And so, yeah, I'm not losing any sleep at night because everybody that needed to know what was happening in the situation that I was in, they know.
Yep.
Same.
inside
Same.
and outside.
Yeah.
And you know what? You may question yourself for a little while after too. It's like, did I do the right thing? Did I do the right thing? Trust me, the fruit will be borne out over time.
Well,
the fruit will be borne.
the easy answer to that is if you shined light on injustice or wrong, then yeah, you did the right. You should have. You did the right thing.
And side note on that, any attempt to be obedient, God honors his obedience.
Yes.
So if you are trying to be obedient, to bring up the things that need to be brought up, even if it doesn't go exactly like you want it to go, God will honor that as obedience, and he's going to take care of you. So don't shy away from that in fear. These conversations have to be had, and they have to be boldly had. They have to be said boldly.
Yeah.
So I think we made a few enemies today, and
Yep.
guess what? I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
hopefully we
Probably won't be the
ruffled
last
some
ones.
feathers. Yeah.
And if you're listening to this
Yep.
and you don't give tithes,
Yes.
try it.
Try it.
Try him.
And all you got to do, what you got to do is just make sure that you feel like the people and the organization that you're giving to is trustworthy, and see if they've got financial transparency. If they have financial transparency, give. Give, and it will be given to you, heaped up, shaken together, full and running over, will men give into your bosom, the scripture says. So there is a principle.
Yep.
If you tithe, you will see blessings of God on your life. And so we're not saying withhold money.
Yeah.
We're saying give it to people who are transparent, and give it to ministries that are transparent and that are going to steward that well, because money is a seed. Hey guys, I want to take just a moment and tell you about a company that is doing something really, really unique in the space of marketing for churches. Zion Multimedia, owned by my friend Kyle Ewald, is making a massive shift to church marketing. They're really kind of reinventing the idea of marketing for churches. And I love it because it's a ministry first approach. I'm not a fan of icky marketing. I'm not a fan of the typical marketing that just says, hey, come join what we're doing, come see us for the Easter service or whatever. I'm not a big fan of just that kind of icky marketing. It's hard for me even to market a lot of my stuff because I just don't like that kind of marketing. And so what's so cool about this ministry first approach is it connects you deeply with the people that you are reaching out to almost immediately in the process. If you followed me at all in social media, which by the way is at the Richie Allen, if you don't follow me, so go there. But if you see, there's the icky marketing part. But if you've followed me at all, you know that I'm a big believer in deep discipleship. And I do believe that the modern day church, for the most part, has kind of missed the mark in that area in favor of just pushing for that weekend service. And what you have to have for deep discipleship, first, you have to have deep connection. And what's so cool about what Zion is doing is that they are connecting you on a deep, deep level early in the process, one-to-one with the people that you're reaching out to. And what this will do is when they do decide to come to church, they're already connected. It's all like they already feel like family before they ever walk in the door. They already feel like they know somebody before they ever walk in the door. And that is going to get them, not only if they come, they're going to stay. And Zion has done such a great job that they have proven this is working. And there's a much greater result when you do it this way, this ministry first approach. I think if you're a pastor or a church leader of any kind in communications or connections or anything like that, you need to reach out to them. And the best way to reach out to Kyle and his team is go to ziondoesitbetter.com/Richie. ziondoesitbetter.com/Richie. And they can get you set up. What's also cool right now is that they do a whole lot of other stuff. They do video production, they do websites, they do all kinds of stuff that you guys would find useful. Right now, they're actually doing like 50% off on a website, which is just great. But don't sleep on this. This is something that you really want to get involved in, and it's a massive blessing for just a little bit of investment. So go check it out, ziondoesitbetter.com/Richie. Thanks for watching Make Peace with War. If you liked this episode, I'd really appreciate it if you'd like it, share it, and hit the subscribe button. You can check out our website at makepeacewithwar.com, where you'll find out more about MPW, outtakes and resources from the show, show notes, links to my YouTube and IG channels, and more. Join us for upcoming episodes as we continue to learn how to become peaceful warriors. God bless.